No pulse, he whispered, sweat pooling at the edge of his white gloves. 30,000 feet in the air, a royal guard knelt between rows of startled passengers, fighting to bring a man back from death. And the uniform they mocked earlier? It was now the only thing holding chaos together. A few hours earlier, they told him that his uniform was just for show, that his seat in first class was better used by someone more appropriate. They didn't know he'd save a life that day. They didn't know that sometimes discipline isn't about standing still. It's about knowing exactly when to move. This is the story of Sergeant Thomas Hartford, the man who stayed silent when disrespected and moved when it mattered most. Before we show you how it all unfolded, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from today. And if you believe respect should be earned, not denied, this is a story you won't forget. Just hours earlier, Hartford's boots echoed across Heathrow Terminal 5 like a drum line of history. The crowd parted around him, some curious, some dismissive. The ceremonial uniform, once admired, had begun to draw skepticism in a world moving too fast to understand symbolism. At the first-class counter, he handed over his ID, passport, and a perfectly folded itinerary. "Sergeant Thomas Hartford," he said, "Royal Guard, traveling to Edinburgh for duty." The check-in agent hesitated. Her fingers twitched over the keyboard. "One moment." She called a manager. Martin Coleman arrived. Tailored suit, clipped tone, ego barely buttoned under his jacket. "This is highly irregular," he said, scanning Hartford up and down. "This isn't Halloween." Hartford didn't blink. Years of guarding palaces had taught him how to stand still in the face of ridicule. Security was called. Documents were verified. But Coleman's tone sharpened, not softened. "This uniform makes people stare," he muttered. "You'll be reassigned to economy." Hartford remained silent. "Understood. Not every battle requires a sword. Sometimes restraint is louder than resistance. Middle seat, narrow legroom. No ceremony, no respect." To Hartford's right sat Walter Simmons, 72, Royal Marines, retired. "Well, I'll be damned," the old man said. "They still make 'em like you." They talked about service, about silence, about the weight of uniforms that people didn't understand. Walter had seen it all, but even he hadn't seen what was coming. A cry, a body collapsing 2 rows back. And suddenly, the aisle became a battlefield. Hartford didn't hesitate. He was trained for discipline, but also for disaster. His ceremonial training included emergency medical response, CPR, AED operation, no pulse. He knelt beside the man, Richard Bennett, and began compressions. Time slowed, hands counted. One life now rested beneath the hands of a man who hadn't even been allowed to sit near the front. But he wasn't thinking about seating or insults. He was thinking, "Don't let this man die." The plane diverted. Paramedics boarded. "Who performed CPR?" one asked. "The guy in red," a flight attendant said. "The one they downgraded." "Textbook perfect," the medic nodded. Bennett survived, barely. His wife gripped Hartford's wrist. "You saved him." He only smiled. "Just did what I was trained to do." In the quiet of Newcastle Airport, Hartford made a call. "Commander Blackwood, sir. I've been delayed." "What happened?" "Medical emergency." I responded. There was silence on the line. "Was that you?" Blackwood asked. "The captain just called. You saved a man's life." "Yes, sir." Blackwood paused again. "Why were you in economy?" Hartford hesitated. "Denied boarding. Uniform questioned. Ticket doubted." Blackwood's tone turned sharp. "Names, airline, terminal, now!" Back in Heathrow, Martin Coleman sat smugly in his office until the door burst open. "Mr. Coleman," said William Chambers, Director of Operations. "Meet Commander Blackwood. Civil Aviation Authority is here too." Security footage played. The downgrade, the sneer, the uniform insulted. "And the man you insulted," Blackwood said, "saved a life, mid-air, in economy." Coleman tried to speak, but the damage was done. "Terminal 5 is grounded pending review," said the CAA agent. "Estimated loss, £4 million. 2 days later, in Edinburgh, Commander Blackwood met Hartford face to face. "Mr. Chambers has something to say." The airline executive bowed his head. "We failed you, Sergeant. The staff responsible are gone. Training protocols have changed. You were disrespected, and we're sorry." Hartford nodded. "I didn't ask for honor, just humanity." "You showed both," Blackwood replied. Later, Hartford received a note from Walter. "Funny, isn't it? If they'd let you sit up front, you might never have been near Bennett. Maybe you were exactly where you needed to be." Hartford smiled. Sometimes fate downgrades your seat to upgrade your purpose. Not every hero flies first class. Some sit in silence until the world truly needs them. Ever been underestimated, only to prove them wrong? Share your moment below, and don't miss what happens next.